Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Brian Koles. That's me. I'll be joined shortly by my colleague Richard Murby, who will introduce himself. And thank you, Mundo API, for putting this on. Hopefully you all can understand us. I understand that English isn't a first language for everyone who is attending, but for those who can understand us, and I hope that's all of you, the goal of this webinar today is for Richard and I to help you understand, first of all, how to get your API and really your developer program ready for prime time, and then how you can use hackathons to get the word out to developers about your API and what it can do, and ultimately grow the ecosystem or marketplace of software applications that are built on your API. So again, I'm Brian at DevPost. I'm the business development director, which really means that I work with companies to help them run online hackathons that last several months, and developers all over the world can participate. Richard will get more into in-person hackathons and what they do. But we're actually going to start out talking just more about sort of general setting up your developer program for success, because before anyone should dive into a hackathon, they need to make sure that their tools are ready. A bit about DevPost just for some context to explain what we do. So we look at ourselves as the home for hackers, and hopefully our community does too. And by hacker, we really mean software makers. So we have a community of now actually over 500,000, mostly developers, but also some designers and open data scientists and other people who use us as a place to showcase their projects and say, here's what I'm working on and the tools that I use to build it, and as a place to learn about new APIs within hackathons. So they see a developer competition, and within that competition, they have to use a certain API or maybe several APIs. So they learn them to create to create applications. And we have done thousands of hackathons. We most recently had our 1,000th in-person hackathon, and we've done many, many more online. So let's talk about getting your dev portal, where you're showcasing your API, ready for developers to hack on it in a software competition. So the first thing, and this is really troubleshooting a lot of, when we work with companies, they frequently say to us, we really want to do a hackathon. We want to get developers in a room to build some apps, or we want to gather them online to build things in our API. And we frequently find that they're getting ahead of themselves in that they're wanting to do a hackathon before they really have all their tools ready for developers to participate. So the first thing is making sure that your developer page, where people are going to come to learn about your API, both in terms of the technical resources and the general value of what it does, is easy to find and well designed. So typically it's at developer.yourdomain.com, as well as linked on the footer of your main page or maybe on the top nav, but generally just easy to find. We also want to make sure that you have thorough documentation, right? So there is a school of thought that a well-done API doesn't even need documentation, which really never works in reality. And so you want to make sure that every functionality in your API and all the common use cases are laid out for anyone to access, as well as providing some code samples. So anytime you can save developers time by taking some of the more simple tasks and basically making them copy and paste or as close to that as possible with code samples or gems, that's a huge help to getting developers started using your platform. We also want to make sure you have a clear usage policy, meaning what are the restrictions? How much am I able to use this? How are you going to charge me to use this? And so that there's no questions. It is very difficult when we've seen situations where developers are using an API and then all of a sudden the rules change on them, or they weren't clear on the rules in terms of how much or how long they're able to use it. So we always want to be upfront upfront with developers, and hopefully everyone knows that developers truly value transparency. And if you're upfront with them, they'll be upfront with you. Again, we want to be very clear on the usage policy. And sign up should be close to self-service, meaning that if a developer wants to use your API, he or she should be able to get an API key without needing to deal directly with anyone on your team. Right, so now oftentimes I understand that you may need to vet them and make sure you're not just giving it out to anyone, but generally it should be as close to self-service as possible where they're not waiting a long time and they don't need to get a whole bunch of approvals to get started. And we want to make sure that we have staff dedicated. So often we will have companies say, we're ready to get developers using our API, and they have a marketing person or two sort of half dedicated to it as part of their job. Right? Well, that's generally not going to get it done, in that developers want support from other developers who understand the API in and out and can give them very quick and accurate feedback on how to use it. So staff up, and we generally talk about if you're truly dedicated to having a developer program and an open API, let's make sure that we are adequately dedicating resources to setting developers up for success. I should also say, and forgive me for not saying this at the beginning, if there are any questions, feel free to send them in the main chat, and Richard and I will try to get to them at the end. More things you can do to get your developer portal ready to engage with developers in hackathons. So make sure that you have separate communication channels for developers different from the rest of the company's, say, marketing or even technical documentation. So usually that means you're going to have a blog that's for developers. You're going to have a social media account that's specifically for developers, and also discussion forums. Not try and blend your developer focus or API focused messaging with any of the other company's communication channels, so that developers know there's one account to follow and one place to go for the information. We also want to make sure that you don't necessarily do hackathons on day one unless the point of the hackathon is to get some feedback on your API. Right? So we want to make sure that the performance is fast, the documentation is thorough enough, and generally that API usability is to a place where you're ready to go with a big developer outreach. You don't want to do a hackathon and then figure out, we should have known to fix these things first. And you want to make sure that from when you launch a developer program and then ongoing, you are constantly providing a place to showcase, look what these developers built on our platform and the value it's providing in the world, and we're very proud of them and want to partner with them in their success. So having a place on your page that is a showcase or a marketplace or anywhere you're, even a blog that's highlighting developers, you want to make that a part of your developer program from the beginning, and really be in it for the long haul. We've seen companies say, well, we're testing out getting an API, so we're maybe going to do a hackathon. Well, it's a bit unfair to developers in that if you're asking them to spend time on your API and invest themselves in your developer program, you should then also be invested in it for the long haul to support them. Because otherwise you could put yourself in a situation where you've asked developers to do something, and then once they've done that, you've sort of taken back its value by killing the API or changing the term. So hopefully all of this has provided a good background for at least setting yourself up for success as you talk about getting into hackathons. And I'm now going to send it over to Richard, who is really one of the world experts on hackathons, especially as they go into civic engagement and open data. So without further ado, Richard, you're up.
Hey, Brian, and hi, everyone else. Thanks so much for the introduction there. So by way of introduction of myself, I'm Richard. So what I do at DevPost is I take care of all of our people that are using DevPost to help at their in-person hackathons. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about kind of what that means and how you might be able to utilize in-person hackathons successfully. So my camera isn't working here, so this is a little picture of me. I say I'm kind of like the Kevin Hart of hackathons in terms of I turn up in a lot of hackathons, not like Kevin Hart seems to be in every movie these days. I'm involved in quite a few hackathons, and that's really great. And it's great in a number of ways. What it enables me to do is actually see a lot of different hackathons that are happening, whether they're kind of collegiate hackathons or whether they're civic and open data hackathons. And it enables me to help different organizers by really kind of sharing some of the best practices that we see going on across this community. This here is kind of my vision of really what I love about hackathons. And this is a photo that was taken at Y Combinator's hackathon in California about a year ago. And this is the phase of the hackathon where everyone was going around and exploring each other's projects and kind of checking out what people built. And for me, that's really, really exciting because that's when you're seeing all of these amazing things that people have created around your issue or around your API. So, that's really, I think, the experience that you're heading for at a hackathon. But let's backtrack a little bit. And I wanted to kind of start off by, framing what I consider a hackathon to be. It's a term that's used a lot these days, and it's used to describe a large number of events. So I thought that it might be helpful for us to have a kind of central idea about what we think about when we think about an in-person hackathon. So here are some thoughts that I put together here, and I'm going to run you through these quickly. So the first thing I think about when I think about what makes a hackathon, I think about developers getting together. So it's people coming together, and whether this is a few people coming together in their dorm room or whether it's a big event like Y Combinators where there's hundreds of developers, and in some events, maybe even over 1,000 developers. The important thing is it's a group of developers coming together, whether that's 10 or 100, really doesn't matter. It's people coming together to build things. And I think what we mean there is really building technology projects. So that could be building apps, it could be building web apps or other software applications. It could also be using some hardware, maybe combining some different hardware and software to make a really fun project. In terms of time frame, in-person hackathons tend to be between 24 and 36 hours, and they're usually on a weekend. And part of the thing that's really fun about hackathons is having that deadline. So the idea that the hacking is going to stop on Sunday, so we've really got to work hard to get as much work done as we can before that deadline. So that's something that really, I think, focuses these events and makes them really fun. Now, in terms of the breadth of different types of hackathons, I think that all hackathons essentially fall into one of these three types. And this is kind of how I like to approach the hackathon world. So the first type of hackathons are what I call civic and community. Now, these may be a lot of open data hackathons. So it could be that your municipal authority is making some open data available. So a community group kind of developers gathers together and says, let's together have an event where we see what valuable projects we can create with this data that the government has made available. Maybe that's local budgeting data, or maybe it's even just transit data. So that's people gathering together and working on that data. Those can be particularly focused in terms of solving a particular social issue. Maybe it's about violence in the community or access to clean water and housing. Or it could just be a kind of general thing where, let's gather together and use some data. I think the second type of company hackathons, this might be the kind of hackathon that you're most familiar with potentially. These are when companies, want to get more users on their API, want to meet more developers. Company hackathons are really kind of the category there. And I would also class hackathons like Y Combinators and Tech Crunches within this category. It's really kind of driven by a company interest. And these are some of the largest hackathons. Just a note there, those could be internal or they could be external. By internal, I mean that they're only open to people that work for that company. And then external are the kind of larger hackathons. And definitely in terms of this presentation, we're really focused on external. External hackathons is really where Brian and I, we focus all of our time, and it's all about engaging external communities to interact with your issues in your company. The third category of hackathons is the college and high school hackathons. These hackathons are taking place in colleges all around the world, and they're really focused on kind of getting students involved, and they're just incredible events, specifically because these are the people that are going to be coming into the workplace soon, and building these new companies and taking great programming jobs. So the college and high school hackathon scene is something really important to be aware of. It's definitely happening in your country. It's happening all over the world, and really exciting things happening there. So I want to make sure that's on your radar, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's move on and let's explore kind of why someone would want to get involved in in-person hackathons. And I've really kind of thought here about 4 particular points that I'd like you to consider. Now, I think that most good hackathons are attempting to hit more than one of these points, but these might be some different motivations that you have to getting involved. You might want to meet more developers. This could be about hiring. We see a lot of people are interested in hiring developers. So maybe your goal is to meet developers. Maybe you're just launching an API and you want to get some feedback on it and kind of see what people are going to do with the API and actually kind of learn more about perhaps its limitations. That's a really good reason to throw a hackathon. The third one, build community. And this should be pretty obvious. And I think really harks back to a lot of the points that Brian opened with, where you really want to think of developers being an integral part of your strategy and really keeping them engaged and getting to know them, getting involved in them. So really kind of keep building that community. Hackathons are a great way to kickstart that and a great way to also have fun with your community. And I think this is a really important thing to bear in mind throughout thinking about hackathons and think about getting involved. I think what makes these events different is it's not regular work. So I'm not sure how many people on this webinar are developers day to day, but being a developer day to day, you're kind of doing QA, you're picking up particular cards, and hackathons are a way to work differently. It's all about experimenting and really about kind of having fun and practicing our craft as engineers. So definitely keep that in mind in everything you think about a hackathon. You want this to be really fun and a really great experience. Okay, so that's something about the motivation of hackathons. So I'm going to assume after this point that you're all really excited about hackathons and you want to get involved. So let's think about how we can get involved. So I think there are 3 main ways that we can get involved in hackathons. You can sponsor a hackathon, you can take part in a hackathon, and this is something that a lot of people don't automatically assume. One thing that a company can do if they want to get involved in the hackathon world is find a great hackathon, go and get involved and be excited about it. And then obviously the third way is to organize a hackathon. And we're going to talk specifically about this one, about how to throw a great hackathon. But first of all, let's review some of the different things. So let's assume that you wanted to sponsor. So sponsoring a hackathon means that you approach an existing hackathon, that you get involved in that hackathon by usually paying. So that means you're going to provide some money towards the organizers to help them throw the event. The amount that you have to pay can range massively depending on the size and scale and ambition of the hackathon. So you're going to have to do your own calculation there on kind of what's the right price point for you. But it's important to bear in mind that I think you are going to need to provide something towards the event. Could be that you send mentors and perhaps buy coffee for the hackathon, or it could be that you purely write a decent sized check. Some things to think about when you're considering sponsoring a hackathon is the safety of the event. This is a really, really important thing to always consider when you're involved in the world of hackathons. Safety means this is an in-person event where people are going to be coming together to work on projects together. I want you to pay particular attention to ensuring that that environment is for the developers to be involved. So that means physical safety, it means safety from harassment, and it also means that you have an environment that creates a really, really positive experience for developers. So definitely something that I want you to bear in mind there. Then also think about the audience. Who is coming to this hackathon? So is it attracting the right people that you want? Is it potentially based in a location that works well for your interests? If you want to build that local community, sponsor a local API. If you're particularly interested in targeting developers in a different country, look for a hackathon to sponsor in those countries. And then here's my final point on sponsoring, is make sure that you send your best people. And Brian mentioned this earlier about staffing up and having really high quality people involved in your developer outreach. The in-person hackathons, whether you're organizing or sponsoring, this is the time to deploy them. So really get them out there in the event and send them specifically with the goal of helping the participants. Really much more important that they go there and help people that are taking part in the event rather than go there with the mindset of just thinking about getting people to start using their API. If they approach it with a mindset of, we're going to help people with any kind of problem they come up to us with, I think that's going to lead to some great results. So let's think about taking part in the hackathon. So I think that, I've got a typo on this slide, but it should be compete or mentor. So this is essentially how you can take part. So you can either go and just enter as a team and take part and become part of the event, or maybe go and offer to be a mentor. This is especially important at hackathons that have younger developers involved. Often some of the engineers on your team could make great mentors, helping them learn a little bit more and helping them understand some new things. I think that that's a really great way to build an awesome brand in a developer community, to give back and really help people. And again, really the same points as sponsoring. You want to send your best people to take part and your best people to mentor, because those people are going to be the ambassadors for your developer program. And then again, the same criteria in terms of make sure it's a good, safe event, well organized, it reaches the audience you want and the location you're looking for. So really important about taking part. So that's all really fun, but I think that what we want to do is actually talk about throwing a hackathon. So let's jump into that and talk about getting our own hackathon going. So first of all, some quick points here. So the number one thing I want you to bear in mind, and if you only take one message away from this webinar, and that's you can do this. Everyone taking part in this today has access to all of the resources they need to throw a really great in-person hackathon that hits all of my criteria of being a fun event, safe and awesome for the developers. The key to doing this is focus on the basics. What does that mean? That means a great space, Wi-Fi and food. Don't run out of food, don't let the Wi-Fi break. When the Wi-Fi breaks, fix it quickly. As long as you do those things, developers are going to have a really great experience. The other message, of course, is use DevPost, obviously. DevPost provides a free platform to use at your in-person events, and we will help promote them to our community all around the world to really bring more attention to the event you're throwing and hopefully get more people to come out and take part. So make use of that. It's a great resource that thousands of hackathons before you have used. So kind of be part of that hackathon community. Use DevPost, and you're going to see a really great amplification on your event. And then the other thing to do is read resources. If you look at our post site, and that's post.devpost.com, you'll find loads of awesome resources about throwing both in-person and online hackathons, and that's going to be really helpful for you. So let's move in a little bit to the event planning. So what I want to do is I want you to think about some of the things that you should be doing in the run-up to the event. So number one is really kind of check out who's coming. And I'm going to show you in a second how you do that on DevPost. But what you can do is see the list of people who are signed up to the event, and you can see the kind of projects that they are involved in. After that, I want you to get people engaged before the event. So focus on having great discussions and host maybe Ask Me Anythings with some of your developer-focused staff so they're able to answer questions. And then make sure that all the prizes and API details are online on your hackathon site. We also have a hackathon metrics dashboard. And if you email hackathons@devpost.com, we can make sure that you set up for your API on that. And that enables you to see some really great usage statistics across different hackathons. So that's a kind of really fun way to kind of keep things engaged. So here's a screen from DevPost, and I'm showing you an example from a TechCrunch hackathon that took place in New York City last May. This is the participants tab, and this is where you're going to find out all of the people that are going to the event. So whenever you're attending a hackathon that's on DevPost, or whether you're organizing a hackathon on DevPost, always be checking this participants tab. This participants tab is really going to help you see what's going on here. Here are the two other areas I want to pay attention to on DevPost before the event as well. The discussion forums. And the discussion forums are where you're going to answer all those questions about your API. It's where you're going to host your Ask Me Anything. And also then the prizes. Prizes are particularly important if you're a sponsor of the event. And I think that what makes that great is making sure that your prize is set up there so developers know, hey, there's a prize if I use this API. That's just going to see a great increase in engagement for you. This is an example of the kind of discussions that evangelists are hosting on DevPost, in these discussion forums. So this is Tim, and Tim's from Nexmo. So he was in here on the discussion forums, really kind of, talking about the API, making sure that people were set up and had access to it before the hackathon kicked off. So those are just some simple things you can do on DevPost in the run-up to the event. Now, also, you should be doing some things off DevPost before the event. And if you've been paying attention to Brian's notes, then you should already be looking at these many already. So number one is make sure those developer docs are up to date. Now, if you're kind of a developer like me, the documentation is often the thing you get to last. This is really the time to make sure that it's all fixed up and really kind of ready to go for prime time, because people are going to be accessing your developer docs at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're having a problem. Make sure they're really well written, make sure they're correct for the latest version of your API, make sure that they're accessible. And then pick the best prizes. And here's a really good point. The best prizes are not just about really giving out massive amounts of money. I think the best prizes validate people's learning and give them an opportunity to build more. And let me give you a great example of that. So I hosted a hackathon last summer that was about bioinformatics. So this was about looking at people's wearables devices and hacking on the data that they were producing. So what we gave as a prize is we gave a body sensor kit that was like a medical testing kit as the prize. And why I think this is a great prize is that if a developer is interested in that kind of data, our prize is probably not something they already own, but it gives them the ability to do more hacking in that area and gets them more excited and gives them more data to work with. So it's a cool prize. It validates that they're interested in this and gives them the opportunity to do more. I think that's a really fun thing. So the final thought here before the event is have a real collective brainstorming with your team that are going to the hackathon and think about why should someone use your API? What's the problem it's going to solve for the developer? What's the thing it's going to enable them to make for their users? So really drill down in this and think about the use case so that you can articulate that quickly to anyone taking part. Okay, so let's assume that we've done all of those things, and then let's switch into during the hackathon. And I'm going to move quite quickly through this, but all these slides are going to be online later on for you to check out as well. So one of the things I want you to do during the hackathon is make sure you're on the discussion board. Developers may be looking for help, and they may be looking for help during the hackathon by not coming up to your table and not interacting with your evangelist. So keep checking all the communications channels. So check Twitter, check the discussion forums on DevPost. Make sure you're using all those places to answer any questions that you have. The other thing we want you to do, and one of the main reasons why people use DevPost, is to have these incredible, beautiful galleries of all of the projects that are taking part. So make sure that you're going into the submissions gallery and you're checking out the projects. If you're sponsoring a hackathon, you'll often be set up as a sponsor prize, as I'm showing here. So if you can see on this screen, for example, if you were representing Yammer at this hackathon, you would go into this gallery, you'd click on Yammer, and then you're going to see all the projects that are using Yammer. That's going to really help you know which teams you need to be interacting with. So then some things that you should be doing during during the hackathon that actually aren't taking place on DevPost. And three really, really important points here. So your goal at the event should always be to help hackers. And what I mean by this is, let's imagine a scenario where, it's 7 p.m. on the Saturday night of a great hackathon. You've got loads of developers, loads of things going on. If a developer comes up to one of your evangelists and says, hey, I need help with JavaScript. I'm not really familiar with it, and I've got this little bug, and I can't work it out. Now, your evangelist shouldn't be thinking, is that person using our API? Your evangelist needs to think, how can I help this person solve that JavaScript problem? So always frame it around help people first, because when you help someone, they will always associate that great experience with your company and with that evangelist. And it's just a fantastic way to get people involved. Now, the other thing is make sure that you think about, if you have a table at the hackathon, the table is a place for people to find you. It's not a place for you to kind of camp out and just have fun with your friends from work. You really want to make sure that you really want to make sure that you're out and about and you're taking part in the event. So don't just camp out behind that table. I've seen some companies do that, and it really never works well for them. Get out from behind the booth, get involved in the event. And here's a question. I think this point perhaps relates to what you were referencing here, Nelson, which is, when would people need help? And I think this is really important here. Keep hacker hours. So at the kickoff of the hackathon, people are going to be building their team. They're going to be thinking about the ideas that they want to work on. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be really deep in the implementation. So try and make sure that you're equipped to support developers at the critical points. At the start of the event, they need to understand your API and they need to understand what it does. But the point when they're really going to need the help is when they're trying to use it, when they're trying to integrate it with whatever they're building. So at that point, make sure that your staff are equipped to help people then. So I think of this as hacker hours. Hacker hours are not the same thing as marketing hours. The hacker hours are those 5 hours before the end of the hackathon, late at night, early in the morning. That's when people are going to get stuck using your API. Make sure you're around to help them then if possible. So let's assume that you've done all of those things and you've had a great hackathon. So you've had a great hackathon, you've inspired loads of developers, people have built some really great projects. What are some of the things that you can do on DevPost as the event wraps up? Well, the first thing I want you to do is go back into the submissions gallery, check out the projects. So what you want to do is really kind of get these projects out, share these projects as widely as possible, make sure you're liking them, make sure you're giving people feedback on DevPost. It's just a really great way to keep that engagement going. And also, most critically, to make sure that people that weren't physically at the event get to experience the projects. So really important to do that. This is an example of a project page on DevPost. You can see there are comments, there are likes. So make sure that you go in there and like it, give them comments, and share these pages so that it encourages people, really to keep working on these projects and be really proud of what they've done. So the other thing I would suggest off DevPost, make sure you blog about the event. Really kind of get that detail out so that people can understand, really what's going on. So I think it's really cool that if you kind of share the events of the hackathon. And then here's another tip. If you gave out prizes at a hackathon, get those prizes to the developers as quickly as possible. If you can't physically give them the prize or give them the winnings check at the event, really get focused on that on Monday morning and get those details out. I think it's really critical to do that, because if developers are waiting a long time to receive a prize that you told them they won, it really kind of ruins their experience, and you want their experience working with you to be fantastic. So I'm going to wrap up here, and I just wanted to say, I think that in-person hackathons have really taken the world by storm, and that's just been an incredible movement because it's inspired so many developers to do some really fun and great things. They're a great way to meet people. They're a great way to find your next star developer that you're going to recruit. And they're also a lot of fun. So I'd like to think if you follow these kind of principles that I've outlined, you can have a great experience and really get some developers going and really kind of have a good time with that. So at this point, I'm going to hand back to Brian, and Brian's going to talk a little bit about how do we take the hackathon just outside the room, and how do we combine this and make this a virtual online hackathon where we can engage more and more people and really take things to the next level. Brian, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Richard. So let's talk about online hackathons, as Richard said. So what he's mostly focused on is the in-person variety, which is probably what most people think about when they talk about a hackathon. But there is this concept of a virtual hackathon. Sometimes this is called a challenge, just to differentiate from the in-person variety. So some reasons you may want to consider doing this online instead of getting people in a room are primarily the participation. By definition, a physical event can only engage people who are in the room. And so online hackathons enable developers all over the world, or at least close to that, to participate. I say close to that because these hackathons are what's called skill-based competitions, and every country, and even within countries, different territories, have different rules governing games of skill and who can participate and where they can be hosted. But almost global participation, I should say, for online hackathons, and all types of developers. In-person hackathons tend to take place on a weekend, and as Richard said, they're kind of sprints over, say, 24 to 36 hours. So, and not every developer, especially senior developers who maybe have a family or other obligations on a weekend, are going to come out and spend the whole weekend dedicated to an in-person hackathon. So by doing this online, developers all over the world can participate and potentially reach a more senior audience of developers who say, yeah, I'm probably not willing to give up my weekend to build a prototype, but I do work on side projects and hone my skills and try new things on nights and weekends and sort of when I get to it. It also can have much more sophisticated implementations. So we'll get into how long these online hackathons last, but generally it's several weeks or months. And so instead of it being build a prototype in 2 days, it can be, in order to participate in this online hackathon, you have to actually build a market-ready, viable application that is user-ready and launched in an app store and ready for the big time. Online hackathons may also enhance the effectiveness of all of your other events. So what I mean by that is they give you a built-in next step whenever you meet a developer at a conference or a meetup or a workshop or whatever sort of in-person events you're doing, or even webinars like this one, to say, today you can get started on our API and maybe get to a prototype, or at least sort of wrap your head around an idea of what you may want to build on this API. Now, spend the next several weeks participating in our online hackathon, where you'll have more time to build a much more meaningful implementation, right? So it can, again, take that sort of hello and turn it into a long-term relationship. And also, they tend to drive bigger awareness and media attention. They can have splashier prizes, bigger judges. There's usually a little bit more focus on the website because it is online. And so these can become almost like their own marketing campaigns long-term with a hashtag and everything that goes with it. So now that we know why you may want to do an online hackathon, I'll briefly, because I know we've taken a good chunk of your time, go into what's going to make an online hackathon successful. So the first off is, and this may seem obvious, but you generally don't want to run the cloud app challenge to build anything. It can be a bit too open and paralyzing in that way. So you want to tell developers, here's the tool or here's the problem that we want you to address, and here's why it is important or helpful to you. Again, may seem obvious, but is often missing in that when people want to do sort of open innovation, it can be too open and people don't know what to build. You also want to make sure this isn't just done off a blog post and a Google spreadsheet or something like that. you want to make sure that, being that this is primarily an online event, you have an online platform, hopefully DevPost, that is a place for developers to say, here's what I'm supposed to do, here's the tools that I should use to do it, here are the people that involved in all the communication forums for getting in touch with the support mechanisms, right? We want to make sure that this website reflects how serious you're taking this hackathon, and that developers can participate for free. We want to make sure that your API access, at least there's some sandbox, some limited access that developers can get to a prototype or get to a decent product without having to pay you first. Because if developers need to pay to access it or go through a bunch of hoops, it's going to really reduce participation. And enough time, as I was sort of getting into in why people do online hackathons, for very broad promotion and making sure that everyone is involved. So when I talk about timing, we have found the sweet spot. I know I wrote 3 to 4 months, but generally about a 2 to 4 month, so I'd say a minimum of 2 months for an online hackathon where we're saying build something from scratch using this API and launch it. Keeping in mind that it's not necessarily that it's going to take that full time to build something, but it can take about a month to get the word out and get the right people involved. And then these are on nights and weekends. We want to make sure that we're leaving enough time for the biggest and best participation. However, if it goes over 4 months, if people come to us and say, I want to run this over the course of the whole year or 6 months plus, well, then it's not very exciting at launch because there's no urgency. There's plenty of time. And by the time the end comes around, it's sort of lost its luster. So we really found, again, more like 2 to 4 months to be the sweet spot for a submission period. And promotion, this shouldn't just be you or just a partner like DevPost. Anyone you work with who has a vested interest in your API or potentially could have a vested interest in your API should be involved. So seek out partners, whether that is meetup organizers or computer science department or industry alliances who mutually benefit from your success. Get them involved. Say, I'll put your logo up if you spread the word about this to your community, or maybe I'll feature your API as well in return for some co-promotion. So certainly the more promotion and the more partners, the better for online hackathons. Richard touched a bit on prizes, but I want to dive a bit deeper as well. So we love when there's a cash prize. Obviously, across any culture, cash is always king and very exciting. But developers also thrive very much on public recognition. How can you make developers look like a hero in front of their peers and say to them in front of people they respect, these developers are superior at their craft and built something really recognizable? Can you bring them to a conference? Can you write about them or feature their stuff? Right. So making developers feel really good in front of their peers, and also providing exclusive experiences, whether that is putting them on stage, whether real or virtual, or getting them access to mentors or meetups or accelerators. Getting them an experience that they couldn't or wouldn't get on their own is very exciting, as are gadgets, something they couldn't buy. Developers love early releases where they can get their hands on something that no one else has, or an experience that no one else can get, as well as marketing support. So more than all of this, developers really just want someone using their stuff, right? They want to build something that people use. So if you can provide marketing support, introducing them to partners or end users and having them actually get people signed up, that's a huge prize as well. So definitely think about all that as you're thinking about the structure of your online hackathon. Also supporting events. So I touched on how online hackathons can increase the effectiveness of. So if you're going to do an online hackathon, you want to have events that feed into it. Right? So you're hosting meetups and you're doing in-person hackathons like Richard covered, and workshops and webinars. Basically anywhere that developers may be, you are meeting them in the real world, face to face, and saying, did you know about this online hackathon? We'd love to have you involved. Maybe today we can take a few minutes to get you signed up for the API and signed up for this online hackathon so you can participate. And so one definitely feeds into the other in terms of in-person and online. Now, judges, use your connections to build some prestige. So we typically recommend for the online hackathons that there is sort of a celebrity panel of judges, meaning there is a few executives from your company, as well as maybe some journalists or researchers or entrepreneurs, anyone who is prominent in the space. Ask them to be a judge. We are always surprised at how willing industry leaders are to be judges in online hackathons, because they don't need to actually show up at an event. It just is a few hours of judging in their own time. All they need to do is put a headshot and a bio and log in at the end of the submission period to rate the app. So we've had Steve Wozniak, one of the original Apple founders. We had Michelle Obama, the first lady of the US, and many other VCs be judges. And we love that, and it certainly adds great prestige to the competition as they spread it to their own networks. Right? They're going to tweet about it. They're going to put it on their social media to get the word out and become a promotional partner. And once it's all said and done, let's make sure that we're not just recognizing the winners, but that everyone who participates feels like you value their time. You are excited that they built something on your platform, that even if they didn't win, that you find their work very promising and really respect their effort. So making sure you reach out to everyone with new opportunities to keep improving their app and thanking them, and hopefully getting them to participate in the next one. I mentioned events, and I know, Richard, you've seen the platform plenty now. I'll just put up one slide from a past client just to show, again, reinforce this point of how in-person events and online hackathons can feed into each other. So this was the Evernote Dev Cup. Hopefully you all know Evernote's a fantastic note-taking app to help you remember things. They did this series of meetups all over the world, again, in the context of please participate in this online hackathon. And hopefully you're doing the same, but these docs don't need to be physical events. They could be your webinars or newsletters. Think of them almost as touch points supporting your online hackathon. That is really about all that I have to say. Certainly happy hacking to you and all the developers in your community who haven't signed up for your API or have already. Richard and I, we really pride ourselves on being as open as possible and as accessible as possible. We love development programs, we love APIs, and we love hackathons. So do feel free to contact us directly if there's anything we can ever do to help you with getting the word out about your API and making your hackathons great. And with that, I believe we're done here. So thank you again so much for attending.
Yeah, thanks everyone from me as well. Brian, I just thought we'd just see if there were any particular questions.
Sure, sounds good.
Sounds to me like, yeah, sounds to me like we covered everything. Hey, Brian, here's a question for you, and maybe this will get people thinking. Do you have a favorite project that you've seen come out of an online hackathon? Anything that you thought was like just a really great example of the kind of things that come out of these events?
Good question. So what I like to see is when we can follow an app from participating in a hackathon to becoming a business. So I think about a few examples like My City Way, which is an app that participated in a competition with New York City, that they won a competition and then went on to get funded by BMW's venture capital team. Another one that came out of that competition, actually, now that I think about it, got acquired by Apple, called Embark. So those are the kind of stories I like to see, as well as from when we do with Samsung smart TVs, again, for an online hackathon. A company got acquired because they ended up building something better for Samsung smart TVs than Samsung had themselves. And then the people who built that went on to become executives in Samsung's the smart TV division. So that's really the kind of stuff that I like to see and certainly value and want to see more of.
That's really cool. Maybe, Brian, I'll take the first look at Mario's question, which was a question about internal hackathons. Mario, I think a few points to think about here in terms of internal hackathons. So the first thing is, what's the goal of an internal hackathon? So if the goal of an internal hackathon is to create new intellectual property, so I mean, like, have some like breakthrough products start being developed for the company, I think that largely there are usually better ways of doing that than relying on a hackathon to kind of create these things. Hackathons can be difficult for all members of the company to attend. I think, as Brian pointed out, not everyone can actually go and take part on a weekend. Some people have family commitments, for example. So holding an internal hackathon and expecting it to behave exactly like an external hackathon, I think, can be difficult in terms of who you're able to effectively engage within your company. However, there are some great internal company hackathons that seek to invite external people to take part in that hackathon with developers from within your company. And there the goal is more about kind of, let's explore interesting ideas together and maybe use some different technologies rather than particularly focusing on creating like new products for that company. Those kind of hackathons I've seen work quite well. The type of internal hackathons that are very focused on creating new products, I've not seen those work particularly well. Personally, I think there are better ways of doing that. Brian, would you like to answer Fernando's question?
Sure. So the question is, what do we have a rule book for virtual hackathon? So if the answer is part of the services that we offer at DevPost, so if we are partnering with a company to run an online hackathon, we basically provide and to be clear about something as well, we support in-person hackathons for free. If you're putting on an event, we give you our web platform, we'll invite developers to attend, it's free. We do charge for online hackathons, and I just want to be upfront about that as I answer this question. So a third thing we do is provide services to help you plan and administer these virtual hackathons. And so a big part of actually what companies pay us to do is to write their rules for them, because we have become experts in online hackathon rules from doing so many of them. And generally it's something that they don't want to touch in-house or pay a lawyer to do, or go find a lawyer to pay to do. So we can write the rules for you if you're doing a virtual hackathon, but also if you poke around our site, every online hackathon we've ever done is public. And we are very diligent about only letting them launch when we feel like the rules are fair to developers and also legally in good standing. So you could possibly find inspiration for rules from some of our past projects. And I don't see any more questions coming in.
Let me see if we can look up Mario so we can hear. Okay, so Mario, let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. So your question is, here's what we're thinking about. We're trying to unite our internal community, which today has some boundaries with each other and some common issues solved. So if you're trying to use a hackathon to kind of grow the community and like grow the way that your developers are kind of working inside the company, then my challenge to you would be twofold, Mario, with this. So first thing is, why not start to rather than starting on kind of company projects where people are kind of worrying about who's responsible for this area, which part of the business it fits in, why not challenge developers from your company to take part in an external hackathon? Why not challenge people to go and create teams and just build some fun products at some other hackathon? Get them to go and take part. Maybe that's a great way to get the developers within your company working with each other and get them used to each other's styles and how they like to collaborate, rather than trying to start initially with company projects. That could be one way to kind of grow that participation and internal community. I think that's kind of interesting. In terms of the kind of solving a common issue, I may be misunderstanding this correctly, but if it's a kind of common issue that the company has across, I think that some of the best times you can are is, really look at that issue and see where is the place that we could get external people to engage on that. I think that often you'll find some interest points there. But yeah, my first thing would be is if you want to build community with the developers inside your company, encourage them to work together on projects that maybe aren't directly related to their day-to-day work. I think that can be really fun, and they're just a great way to get people in a different set of working together. Okay, I'm looking at the time here, and maybe, Brian, it makes sense to wrap up at this time. Mario, I hope those answers were helpful for you. And, if you do want to discuss that further, my email address is up here on the screen. Drop me a note, and, we'll chat a little bit more about what you're doing there.
Great. Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Maybe we'll wrap this up here now.